I got kicked for some reason. An error occurred. I mean, I did just download some updates, but definitely, it's not free. Go ahead and change it. In the middle of his talking, good thing he stopped for a second. Good thing it was a good time. let him continue. Over here, Shiloh. I'm letting you talk. I'm listening to him talk. I enjoy listening to it. I enjoy the story and what's going on. Hearing about it. The train. Which ones were loaded? So that's what it is, huh? So now you're getting into some science. They would have to be sending that vibration ahead of time. You understand? Like you're that's like future. You see? That's kind of what I'm talking about. On the road, they're basically sending the vibration ahead of time. But in order to do so, they would have to amplify it. Like they would have to grab it. There would have to be another, like a... And it would have to be willingly done. But yeah, that's basically when I can tell when they're coming down the road because they're sending their vibration up the road into my house with a way station. These little pops that keep happening. I don't know what they're doing. With paperwork, I don't know what the hell's going on. And I think Buchanan already said like he would be above you because he was before you. He was like a father as far as presidents go. As far as establishing executive orders, because he's two places at once, and he just established that, and he did step inside of me, and he was having a conversation. So let it be known and clear here, ARC, Oval Office. I'm not listening to your shit. I don't need to hear your personal opinions whatsoever. I'm not working with you. You owe me money. Like a royalty here.
Out opposition.
Excuse me.
Everything had been destroyed or carried away. The Confederate commander had instructed his soldiers to cheer on the arrival of every train to create the impression among the Yankees that reinforcements were arriving. There was not a sick or wounded man left by the Confederates, nor...
I'll give them the last one. I really don't want to walk down the road with machete, you know? Yeah, I don't know what they're thinking at all here. I'm good. No thanks.
Of any kind. Some ammunition had been blown up, not removed. But the trophies of war were a few Quaker guns, logs of about the diameter of ordinary cannon, mounted on wheels.
A Quaker gun, huh? I want to hear about this Quaker gun. You sound like the orderer.
The wagons and pointed in the most threatening manner towards us. The possession of Corinth by the national troops was of strategic importance, but the victory was barren in every other particular. It was nearly bloodless. It is a question whether the morale of the Confederate troops engaged at Corinth was not improved by the immunity with which they were permitted to remove all public property and then withdraw themselves. On our side, I know officers and men of the Army of the Tennessee, and I presume the same is true of those of the other commands, were disappointed at the result. They could not see how the mere occupation of places was to close the war while large and effective rebel armies existed. They believed that a well-directed attack would at least have partially destroyed the army defending Corinth. For myself, I am satisfied that Corinth could have been captured in a 2 days campaign, commenced promptly on the arrival of reinforcements after the Battle of Shiloh. General Halleck at once commenced erecting fortifications around Corinth on a scale to indicate that this one point must be held if it took the whole national army to do it. All commanding points 2 or 3 miles to the south, southeast, and southwest were strongly fortified. It was expected, in case of necessity, to connect these forts by rifle pits. They were laid on a scale that would have required 100,000 men to fully man them. It was probably thought that a final battle of the war would be fought at that point. These fortifications were never used. Immediately after the occupation of Corinth by the national troops, General Pope was sent in pursuit of the retreating garrison, and General Buell soon followed. Buell was the senior of the 2 generals and commanded the entire column. The pursuit was kept up for some 30 miles, but did not result in the capture of any material of war or prisoners, unless a few stragglers who had fallen behind and were willing captives. On the 10th of June, the pursuing column was all back at Corinth. The Army of the Tennessee was not engaged in any of these movements. The Confederates were now driven out of West Tennessee, and on the 6th of June, after a well-contested naval battle, the national forces took possession of Memphis and held the Mississippi River from its source to that point. The railroad from Columbus to Corinth was at once put in good condition and held by us. We had garrisons at Donelson, Clarksville, and Nashville on the Cumberland River, and held the Tennessee River from its mouth to Eastport. New Orleans and Baton Rouge had fallen into the national forces. Now the Confederates at the west were narrowed down for all communication with Richmond to the single line of road running east from Vicksburg. To dispossess them of this, therefore, became a matter of the first importance. The possession of the Mississippi by us from Memphis to Baton Rouge was also a most important object. It would be equal to the amputation of a limb in its weakening effects upon the enemy. After the capture of Corinth, a movable force of 80,000 men, besides enough to hold all the territory acquired, could have been set in motion for the accomplishment of any great campaign for the suppression of the rebellion. In addition to this, fresh troops were being raised to swell the effective force. But the work of depletion commenced. Buell, with the Army of the Ohio, was sent east, following the line of the Memphis and Charleston Railroad. This he was ordered to repair as he advanced, only to have it destroyed by small guerrilla bands or other troops as soon as he was out of the way. If he had been sent directly to Chattanooga, as rapidly as he could march, leaving 2 or 3 divisions along the line of the railroad from Nashville forward, he could have arrived with but little fighting and would have saved much of the loss of life which was afterwards incurred in gaining Chattanooga. Bragg would then not have had time to raise an army to contest the possession of Middle and East Tennessee and Kentucky. The battles of Stone River and Chickamauga would not necessarily have been fought. Burnside would not have been besieged in Knoxville without the power of helping himself or escaping. The Battle of Chattanooga would not have been fought. These are the negative advantages, if the term negative is applicable, which would probably have resulted from prompt movements after Corinth fell into the possession of the national forces. The positive results might have been a bloodless advance to Atlanta, to Vicksburg, or to any other desired point south of Corinth in the interior of Mississippi. End of section 26. Recording by Jim Clevenger, Little Rock, Arkansas. Jim at jocclev.com. Section 27 of Personal Memoirs of U.S. Grant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jim Clevenger. Personal Memoirs of U.S. Grant by Ulysses S. Grant, Chapter 27. Headquarters moved to Memphis. On the road to Memphis. Escaping Jackson. Complaints and requests. Halleck appointed Commander-in-Chief. Return to Corinth. Movements of Bragg. Surrender of Clarksville. The advance upon Chattanooga. Sheridan, Colonel of a Michigan regiment. My position at Corinth, with a nominal command and yet no command, became so unbearable that I asked permission of Halleck to remove my headquarters to Memphis. I had repeatedly asked, between the fall of Donelson and the evacuation of Corinth, to be relieved from duty under Halleck, but all my applications were refused until the occupation of the town. I then obtained permission to leave the department, but General Sherman happened to call on me as I was about starting and urged me so strongly not to think of going that I concluded to remain. My application to be permitted to remove my headquarters to Memphis was, however, approved, And on the 21st of June, I started for that point with my staff and a cavalry escort of only a part of one company. There was a detachment of 2 or 3 companies going some 25 miles west to be stationed as a guard to the railroad. I went under cover of this escort to the end of their march, and the next morning proceeded to LaGrange with no convoy but the few cavalrymen I had with me. From LaGrange to Memphis, the distance is 47 miles. There were no troops stationed between these 2 points, except a small force guarding a working party which was engaged in repairing the railroad. Not knowing where this party would be found, I halted at LaGrange. General Hurlbut was in command there at the time and had his headquarters tents pitched on the lawn of a very commodious country house. The proprietor was at home and, learning of my arrival, he invited General Hurlbut and me to dine with him. I accepted the invitation and spent a very pleasant afternoon with my host, who was a thorough Southern gentleman, fully convinced of the justice of secession. After dinner, seated in the capacious porch, he entertained me with a recital of the services he was rendering the cause. He was too old to be in the ranks himself. He must have been quite 70 then, but his means enabled him to be useful in other ways. In ordinary times, the homestead where he was now living produced the bread and meat to supply the slaves of his main plantation in the lowlands of Mississippi. Now he raised food and forage on both places and thought he would have that year a surplus sufficient to feed 300 families of poor men who had gone into the war and left their families dependent upon the patriotism of those better off. The crops around me looked fine, and I had at the moment an idea that about the time they were ready to be gathered, the Yankee troops would be in the neighborhood and harvest them for the benefit of those engaged in the suppression of the rebellion instead of its support. I felt, however, the greatest respect for the candor of my host and for his zeal in the cause he thoroughly believed in, though our views were as wide apart as it is possible to conceive. The 23rd of June, 1862, on the road from LaGrange to Memphis was very warm, even for that latitude and season. With my staff and small escort, I started at an early hour, and before noon we arrived within 20 miles of Memphis. At this point, I saw a very comfortable-looking white-haired gentleman seated at the front of his house, a little distance from the road. I let my staff and escort ride ahead while I halted and, for an excuse, asked for a glass of water. I was invited at once to dismount and come in. I found my host very genial and communicative, and stayed longer than I had intended, until the lady of the house announced dinner and asked me to join them. The host, however, was not pressing, so that I declined the invitation and, mounting my horse, rode on. About a mile west from where I had been stopping, a road comes up from the southeast, joining that from LaGrange to Memphis. A mile west of this junction, I found my staff and escort halted and enjoying the shade of forest trees on the lawn of a house located several hundred feet back from the road, their horses hitched to the fence along the line of the road. I, too, stopped, and we remained there until the cool of the afternoon and then rode into Memphis. The gentleman with whom I had stopped 20 miles from Memphis was a Mr. Deloche, a man loyal to the Union. He had not pressed me to tarry longer with him because in the early part of my visit, a neighbor, a Dr. Smith, had called and, on being presented to me, backed off the porch as if something had hit him. Mr. Deloche knew that the rebel General Jackson was in that neighborhood with a detachment of cavalry. His neighbor was as earnest in the Southern cause as was Mr. Delouche in the...
I'm gonna stop there. Step outside for a second after this game. After we finish our duty, we'll step outside and see if we get some action. It's been like a week since I've done that. I try to do it like every other day. It's going good though. Dr. Smith, dude, you're throwing battle plans at me and I'm trying to have to pay attention and come up with a plan myself. I have to do a lot. I'm doing a lot of work here. A lot of actions to be taken. I have to dual wield it, basically. And it's like I'm not really in the game right now. My head's not all there. I think he mentioned that. This is fun though. I'm having fun with him. This is great. You keep trying to cop out. You keep trying to back out of your duty and go somewhere else. You're partying too much, I think is what it is. Maybe you're just winning that bad. I don't know. Zing! There it is, the jab. A bunch of drunken fools is what it sounds like. He's going up the, yep. Bunch of party boys. Far from it though. He said it wasn't bloody. As far as that battle, I guess. I mean, I guess you're dealing with cannons. That's probably what it was. Dude, you probably had some crazy invention. I mean, you probably came out with the cotton gin. Made slavery obsolete. Banned it outright. Hey, it's all that matters, right? I'm sloppy right now. I don't look good doing it. I was sitting there standing in a heat ray the entire fucking time. So now it's like my eyeballs and the arc. It's really not cool. I'm a little jittery. My elbows are a little... It's like... I'm really dry. And so when I rub things, it sticks. It's not rubbing properly. The slide is not there as it should be. And my elbows are a little jittery. Which, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's the desk. You're putting a vibration inside the house, the way station, and then it's covering the desk. And that's where the elbow is coming in from. It's like I'm basically absorbing that energy. I see him. There's two of them right here. Oh shit. Ah, he got me. The whole point of the Civil War, well, little did we know. Little did we know. I don't know why they keep doing that at all. Again, I'm not working with them, so. I don't know why they keep saying eternal. I'm the one. I say it's me, dude. No. It's annoying. Okay, so let me go outside. Let me step outside for a second. So what's not going to happen? That's definitely good, but what's not going to happen is a drone hovering over my back door. What we're not going to strong arming me. You're committing a crime right now. See, that kind of ruined it. Because you're not welcome. You know what I mean? I hate to break it to you. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but because you gave me so much trouble, knowingly and wittingly, because you gave me so much trouble, knowingly and wittingly, I'm not going to work with you at all. Stop doing that. But that's incredible, the moon? Oh my gosh, I'm glad you told me to do that. What timing? 10:49? Are you making sure that I'm being honest with you? Is that what it is? November 20th? You can tell by the moon cycles if I'm being honest or not. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. The future, see, you're not the one who made it. And if you're the president, you'd be the highest up above everybody because you have the ark, and because you don't know this information, I can only assume that you are not the one in charge. And I don't really appreciate the harassment and the torture and assault, amongst other things. Gaslighting whenever I'm working. Ladies, I don't know what else to tell you. I'm more than mad at you. What an amazing... We've had this talk, Mr. Grant. What an amazing moon. It's like there's 4 stars just sitting in a cup in a bowl. Man, if I only had my own... I just don't know what I would... Excuse me. It's like the letter C in a bowl. Maybe midnight will be more appropriate. I will do a resin hit for you. It is cold. Chilly. Well, Mr. Grant, that is quite the surprise. I don't pay attention to the moon cycles at all. I don't know anything, so every night's a surprise to me. And I haven't been out there for a week, so that's even better. Put shamanic revelation over it. Shamanic revelation over here. Excuse me, you're in war, you're actually killing people, so it's like, that's probably nothing to you. For morale, it was good for morale. I'm right there with you, dude. I'm getting angry with you. You riled me up, boys. Get 'em, boys. So you want the inside of Mississippi. You want some battle plans, do you? For that I would do it. But how do I know you're not spying? I mean, it is Mississippi, so I guess it doesn't matter. The old slavery days, huh? And it makes me, whenever you mention bullfighting, you didn't like bullfighting. So, I mean, I can only imagine, if they were doing it with bulls, like, you couldn't imagine. So, to me, whenever maybe, like, you're saying key things here, kind of giving them information. Maybe that's why you went to war, you know? Now, from another side, they said it wasn't true. But I mean, you're in the war, so you would only know. We get the truth as the president. Was the Civil War real? The question and answer time. I don't have a lot of questions. I just let you talk, say what you want. It's confusing for me because you're mentioning things that like tie to me directly. So it immediately makes me think of that and like what you were doing precisely. It's kind of, that's where I get lost. What else? What else has been brought up? Now that I mentioned that, I just thought of the bullfighting. I just remember that. So now that we're talking about the actual slavery, if they were doing it with a bull, man. And I've heard of that. Maybe that has to do with the, that's PETA. PETA strikes back. After the Civil War, they went to the American-Spanish War. It was for the bulls, dude. The pit bull fighting. All right. Point. Oh. What a good night. Oh my gosh. Good thing we did that out the door. What a beautiful, oh my goodness. See, this is where it's like, to me, like obviously you're not the creator as you've divulged. You've said too much, sir. You've said too much. I mean, obviously you wouldn't be, because people in the past could see me, but still, if you don't have that information, it was not passed down. It had to have been there since the dinosaurs. Like, the whole heart thing, you know what I mean? Like, Adam was like, been like a reptilian. If you were to play Chrono Trigger, Adam would be the reptile dude. And then I would be Chrono. Inside the ark. The heartbeat. We'll do a dual memoir here. We're in two places at the same time, sir. It makes me think of Resident Evil, the meta meme, the big on Village, the meta site, the big thing at the end that Chris finds. So picture that, but like it's an actual baby inside the womb, and like and then you consider Ant-Man. So Chris would be like Ant-Man. So like if you're talking about Dante's, like the levels of hell, I guess, if you would, to give an example, you're talking about a pressure thing. So this level on Earth would be like an entire pressure block. So then you go lower into a lower pressure block, but it all has to do with light as well. Like it all ties in, but it all has to do with the pressure. You know, ice and stuff. I mean, I would have to be like a doorway. I don't know how you... I will not play that game. That's the moon cycles, dude. I'm tied into them. Like, I do things not knowing what the moon cycle is going to be, and then I'll see the moon cycle and like it's like a flash, like certain specific moments that happened in the last like 2 or 3 days. Be the exact constellation. That's the thing about it. It's like I'm moving along about my day, and then like that moment where they flash it. It's weird. I mean, you tell me. I can only assume this woman in the dark that I saw, I don't know if I was meant to see her or if like that was an accident. I'm that good? I don't know. But that's the pressure thing. In the swine, in the dark, deep, the black, as she was right in front of me, real quick. That's what it all comes back to. We haven't talked about that yet, Mr. Grant. I just did the Bible. I'm doing Genesis. I could whip out the Bible, sir. Throw down the Bible on Genesis. That's what it all comes down to. I'll be right back. So now that I notice my eye, it looks like a pair of glass indentions, like I'm wearing a pair of glasses. So it only leads to assume that the officer and the robot are not agreeing with each other. And you're doing an eye retina scan in order to open up something. And then it's coming back to me. Because I don't wear glasses and I have an indention. And you're the only one that would wear glasses. So that is going to stop.
Of the Union. The exact location of Jackson was entirely unknown to Mr. Deluche, but he was sure that his neighbor would know it and would give information of my presence, and this made my stay unpleasant to him after the call of Dr. Smith. I have stated that a detachment of troops was engaged in guarding workmen who were repairing the railroad east of Memphis. On the day I entered Memphis, Jackson captured a small herd of beef cattle which had been sent east for the troops so engaged. The drovers were not enlisted men, and he released them. A day or two after, one of these drovers came to my headquarters and, relating the circumstances of his capture, said Jackson was very much disappointed that he had not captured me, that he was 6 or 7 miles of the Memphis and Charleston Railroad when he learned that I was stopping at the house of Mr. Deluche and had ridden with his command to the junction of the road he was on with that from LaGrange and Memphis, where he learned that I had passed 3/4 of an hour before. It would be useless to pursue horses a well-mounted party with so much of a start. Had he gone 3/4 of a mile further, he would have found me with my party quietly resting under the shade of trees and without even arms in our hands with which to defend ourselves. General Jackson, of course, did not communicate his disappointment at not capturing me to a prisoner, a young drover, but from the talk among the soldiers, the facts related were learned. A day or two later, Mr. Deluche called on me in Memphis to apologize for his apparent incivility in not insisting on my staying for dinner. He said that his wife accused him of marked discourtesy, but that after the call of his neighbor, he had felt restless until I got away. I never met General Jackson before the war, nor during it, but have met him since at his very comfortable summer home at Manitou Springs, Colorado. I reminded him of the above incident, and this drew from him the response that he was thankful now he had not captured me. I certainly was very thankful too. My occupation of Memphis as district headquarters did not last long. The period, however, was marked by a few incidents which were novel to me. Up to that time, I had not occupied any place in the South where the citizens were at home in any great numbers. Dover was within the fortifications at Fort Donelson, and, as far as I remember, every citizen was gone. There were no people living at Pittsburgh Landing, and but very few at Corinth. Memphis, however, was a populous city, and there were many of the citizens remaining there who were not only thoroughly impressed with the justice of their cause, but who thought that even the Yankee soldiery must entertain the same views if they could only be induced to make an honest confession. It took hours of my time every day to listen to complaints and requests. The latter were generally reasonable, and if so, they were granted. But the complaints were not always or even often well-founded. Two instances will mark the general character. First, the officer who commanded at Memphis immediately after the city fell into the hands of the national troops had ordered one of the churches of the city to be opened to the soldiers. Army chaplains were authorized to occupy the pulpit. Second, at the beginning of the war, the Confederate Congress had passed a law confiscating all property of alien enemies at the South, including the debts of Southerners to Northern men. In consequence of this law, when Memphis was occupied, the provost marshal had forcibly collected all the evidence he could obtain of such debts. Almost the first complaints made to me were these two outrages. The gentleman who made the complaints informed me first of his own high standing as a lawyer, a citizen, and a Christian. He was a deacon in the church which had been defiled by the occupation of Union troops and by a Union chaplain filling.
My friend, I've never read the Bible. Ever. If we go back, and you can look at me in the art, if you go back and you look at me in the Sunday church, we did not learn. No. Several times, no. We were left in a room, no. I don't even think we talked about the Bible whatsoever. It was more like a babysitting. You know what I mean? So you can go back and watch all the moments I've had any interaction with the Bible, and you will not find me ever reading it, or hearing about it, or paying attention to hearing about it. Right there, as you talk about Christianity, I'm about to whip out the Bible on you and read a scripture of Genesis. As we talk about Adam, just to put you in your place. And you will not find it in the Ark, because it does not exist, it has not happened. So, let it be clear, any interaction is how it was recorded. Whether they actually wrote it, I do not know. That's the question. The question at hand here. To be or not to be. That is the question. Literally. Or did it not? The question of questions. Who actually wrote it? I mean, obviously you wrote it down, but not to be funny. Let me fight. Get this guy back. Oh. Heck yeah, dude. It's pretty solid. You were talking about alien enemies? Now you're throwing me off. What? They go around beating the shit out of everybody? Oh. They gave America Call of Duty. You're next, boys. I'm not playing very well. I can't focus. My focus is off right now. Those are pretty heavy mortar. I do not have the cash. You're frying your brain in that spot. Yeah, I don't know, it's hard for me to focus, it's weird. Normally it does not happen. I can do that. Yeah, I need to loot up. I need to get some ammo. I can actually hear it for once. What a bad choice. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Ooh, barely got out of that one. I'm a little sticky, dude. I'm not there. My pinky just keeps rubbing on the ground. I'm dragging hard. I have no strategy. It's all on the fly. We wing it. You go on the right wing, dude. You have to. That's the only way. That's war, dude. You have to wing it. If you can't wing it, you're not gonna make it. I like how you were going through that. Different groups from different areas had different attributes as far as like running and being able to keep up stamina and stuff, and how you guys were the prowess. You guys were applying the prowess to the battalion. Damn. What? He's up on the tower. What? What a snipe. What a pro snipe. The Dr. Smith. Well, who gave me that license? I appreciate you. Nobody gave me that license. Definitely not a doctor. That's how they do it nowadays. Doctor, huh? I think we have pictures. He was a doctor. My great-great-grandfather? Is that who you're talking about? He was a doctor. Go ahead and get out the scripture here. Hold on. Lay down the law. All good? We're all good? I don't know where I'm at. We got Call of Duty out on the scripture, on Genesis. We are at Genesis 42. Chapter 42 of Genesis. Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do ye look one upon another? And he said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither, and buy for us from thence, and then we may live and not die. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt, but Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, Lest peradventure mischief befall him. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan, to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them, and said unto them, Ye are spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. And so I would be Joseph here, in the Alzheimer's. Which is funny how I'm talking to the president, and that still was allowed to fly. Little beanie baby. And they said unto him, Nay, my lord, but to buy food are thy servants come. We are all one man's son. We are true men, thy servants are no spies. And he said unto them, Nay, but to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. And they said, Thy servants are 12 brethren, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is not. And Joseph said unto them, That is it that I spake unto you, saying, Ye are spies. Hereby ye shall be proved, by the life of Pharaoh ye shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. Send one of you, and let him fetch your brother, and ye shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh surely ye are spies. And he put them all together into ward 3 days. And Joseph said unto them the third day, This do, and live, for I fear God. If ye be true men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison. Go ye, carry corn for the family of your houses, but bring your youngest brother unto me, so shall your words be verified, and ye shall die. And they did so. And they said one to another, We are verily guilty concerning our brother, and that we saw the anguish of his soul when we besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. I don't know. Are you the one that made the ark? It's all about that intent. And Reuben answered them, saying, Spake I not unto you, saying, Do not sin against the child, and ye would not hear? Therefore, behold, also his blood is required. And they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter. And he turned himself about from them, and wept, and returned to them again, and communed with them, and took them Simon, and bound him before their eyes. Then Joseph commanded to fill their sacks with corn, and to restore every man's money into his sack, and to give them provision for the way, and thus did he unto them. And they laded their asses with the corn, and departed thence. And as one of them opened his sack to give his ass provender in the inn, he espied his money, for behold, it was in his sack's mouth. And he said unto his brethren, My money is restored, and lo, it is even in my sack. And their heart failed them, and they were afraid, saying one to another, What is this that God hath done unto us? And they come unto Jacob their father unto the land of Canaan, and told them all that befell unto them, saying, The man who is the Lord of the land spake roughly to us, and took us for spies of the country. And we said unto him, We are true men, we are no spies. As be 12 brethren, sons of our father, one is not, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. And the man, the Lord of the country, said unto us, Hereby shall I know that ye are true men. Leave one of your brethren here with me, and take food for the famine of your households, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother unto me, then shall I know that ye are no spies, but that ye are true men. So will I deliver you your brother, and ye shall traffic in the land. And it came to pass, as they emptied their sacks, that behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when both they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. Well, that's not true. And Jacob, And Jacob their father said unto them, Me have ye bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, and Simon is not. Ye will take Benjamin away. All these things are against me. And Reuben spake unto his father, saying, Slay my 2 sons, if I bring him not to thee. Deliver him into my hand, and I will bring him to thee again. And he said, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in the which ye go, then shall ye bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. So I guess that's what the Civil War, part of the Civil War was about. Part of it. Because, they're openly talking. He wants me to be open about it. I'll be right back. I'm going to get milk. Alright, we'll do one more. We'll do one more for you, old Benjamin over here. Because he's the one that wrote it. Chapter 43. And the famine was sore in the land. It came to pass, when they had eaten of the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said unto them, Go again, and buy us a little food. And Judah spake unto him, saying, The man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. If thou wilt send our brother with us, we will go down and buy thee food. But if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. And Israel said, Wherefore dealt ye so ill with me, as to tell the man whether ye had yet a brother? And they said, The man asked us straitly of our state, and of our kindred, saying, Is your father yet alive? Have ye another brother? And we told him according to the tenor of these words. Could we certainly know that he would say, Bring your brother down? You talking about the ark? Yeah, you are not the creator of this ark. Down to Egypt, a little bit of corn. And Judah said unto Israel his father, Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. I will be surety for him of my hand. Shalt thou require him, if I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. For except we had lingered, surely now we had returned the second time. And their father Israel, that's Moses, and their father Israel said unto them, If it must be so now, do this. Take of the best fruits in the land in your vessels, and carry down the man a present, a little balm and a little honey, and myrrh, nuts, and almonds. And take double money in your hand, and the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks. Carry it again in your hand, peradventure it was an oversight. That doesn't an oversight? But me of all people? I mean, not... Take also your brother, and arise, go again unto the man. And God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may send away your other brother and Benjamin. If I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. The ark. No. And the men took that present, and they took double money in their hand, and Benjamin, and rose up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of his house, Bring these men home, and slay, and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon. And the man did as Joseph bade, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. And the men were afraid, because they were brought into Joseph's house, and they said, Because of the money that was returned in our sacks at the first time are we brought in, that he may seek occasion against us, and fall upon us, and take us for bondmen and our asses. Sir, the ark, my dude. It is a simple question. I don't give a fuck. Stop doing it. Out of 1 out of a trillion people, like you, God Almighty, all you want. Until lightning bolts come out of my fingers, and I can snap. Like, and they came near to the steward of Joseph's house, and they communed with him at the door of the house. I mean, I see it, and said, O sir, we came indeed down at the first time to buy food, and it came to pass, when we came to see the end, that we opened our sacks, and behold. Get a straight answer out of someone. Fuck. Beat around the bush. It's literally, I get an answer for everything but. My dude, I mean, I guess if other people are watching. I'm not popular of a guy, let me tell you. Every man's money was in the mouth of the sack, our money in full weight, and we have brought it again in our hand. And other money have we brought down in our hands to buy food. We cannot tell who put our money in our sacks. We cannot tell who put our money in our sacks. Well, isn't that just amazing? We have an unknown ghost that nobody knows, not even the holder of the ark. Not even Genesis knows. Hold on, let me go back to the beginning here about Adam and Eve and the creation. On day one, what happened? Let me see this. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And darkness and earth was without form. God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. And darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. What? I know it's me out in the desert. It's that little eyeball. It's you and your ship, and you're shooting at God, is what you're doing. That still doesn't explain it. Like, it literally does not explain anything other than that moment. Excuse me. Let me outbid you. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. A firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Alright. We cannot tell who put our money in our sacks. And he said, Peace be to you. Fear not. Your God and the God of your father hath given you treasure. I had your money, and he brought Simon out unto them. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house, and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their asses provender. And they made ready the present against Joseph came at noon, for they heard that they should not eat bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed themselves to him to the earth. And he asked them of their welfare, and said, Is your father well? The old man of whom ye spake, is he yet alive? And they answered, Thy servant our father is in good health, he is yet alive. And they bowed down their heads, and made obeisance. And he lifted up his eyes, and saw his brother Benjamin, and his mother's son, and said, Is this your younger brother, of whom ye spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother, and he sought where to weep, and he entered into his chamber, and wept there. And he washed his face, and went out, and refrained himself, and said, Set on bread. So I'm Joseph, that which would be God, gracious unto thee, my son. God, my son. God and the son are, as far as the sentence structure goes, right underneath each other, right side by side. His bowels did yearn upon his brother. So Joseph's Cain. I would be Cain. Cain, obviously Clayton, Cain. So this is Cain and Abel. This is where it all begins. We're in Genesis. I keep forgetting. Back to reality. I left for a couple weeks. And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother. He peed on his brother, and he sought... Okay, hold on. And he sought where to weep, and he entered into his chamber and wept there. And he washed his face and went out and refrained himself and set on bread. So Cain and Abel would be Ra and Set, Horus and Set. And they set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians which did eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination unto the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth, and the men marveled one at another. And he took and sent messes unto them for before him, but Benjamin's mess was 5 times so much as any of theirs, and they drank and were merry with him. Okay. That's... What? Excuse me, sir. Chapter 44. You're confused, sir. The abomination. Getting into the deep, deep story. I know that. I know that about him. That's known. Alright, so we'll continue with Ulysses here. Child, you children. I feel like I'm walking into something I should not be walking into. You know what I mean? You know, like you walk in on your dog doing something and it hunches over. It knows it's been caught. That's what this feels like. Like I just walked in on my dog. Like, what are you doing, bro? What the fuck is this? That's how I feel. In the beginning, the firmament. So that's one of my thoughts. I've already thought of that. I can picture that. So you're talking about the there's more than one ship, first of all. I mean, you can see them on Earth. There's a reflection. So you have to think of it. Everything's a reflection of it. There would be no way around it. There has to be a platform, a basis, like a root, you know? That's the thing about crystals. There's no root as far as light is concerned. It's kind of similar to a crystal. So Earth would have to it would have to have a root, a platform to base itself, to land on. And so on Earth you can see the ships. So that would be the reflection in the base, the root. It's one of my thoughts. It's basically the ship is out in space reflecting what it sees. Excuse me, my friend had to step in for a second. So nobody, not even Genesis, knows the right answer here. What the fuck is this ark? I'm not arguing, dude. Like, your son, no, dude. That argument's not there. It's a bad argument. Unless I'm like glowing yellow, like flying around, you know, ricocheting bullets. I don't want to hear it. Like, I don't want to hear it. Thumbs down. This arc. Good vibes, definitely good vibes. Fuck you. Whoever you are. Fuck you, dude. I was told it's for my protection. Fuck you. Stretch it off real quick. You're full of shit. No, I don't know. I like this arc. So, Hollywood, it's like, I hate to be that guy and throw you under the bus, and I'm not going to name names, but it's Hollywood. You definitely have the art. That I know. I'm positive it's the Oval Office. That's feeding you when they should not be feeding you because it's not free. This is doorway. What? So from the gist of it, I take it that they can basically step inside me. Like, they are literally two places at once. Inside of it, like, I can feel them, like, when they step inside it. Like, again, that hologram thing. So, I'm positive it's the Oval Office. Which would be the ship. I will not accept this. Creation or not, like the firmament, the basis or not, like it's still a reflection of whatever you're looking at. It's basically the ship is like a mirror. It was as shiny as a mirror. Like, so imagine if like it's sitting up in the sky and the sun is shining on it and it's a mirror. That is what it is. So whatever Earth is that is reflecting it. The heaven and earth. I don't know, dude. As I read Genesis, I shouldn't have done it. No. Mr. Grant, we shouldn't have done this. That's the U.S., the United States. This art, dude. So there's definitely something up there. And there's more than one of them. I'll go through all my encounters again. Talk about these ships. They're all different kinds. They're all doing different things. I don't know if it's the same one or if it's different ships, like showing off, showboating. There's only been one time that I could actually like envision it, what's inside of it. And I mean like very detailed. I don't know if that was like a dream or like some acid trip shit. I don't do that, but I'm just saying in light of the situation. Whatever shows in the arc, I guess they would only know, even though they should not. So, I get it. I see everything. There's things I haven't said. There's things I cannot show you. Things that have happened. There's just like, it's a faith thing that I don't really care to share. Which ties into like Adam. And like God and everything. But it's like, it lacks luster until like lightning bolts are coming out of my fingertips, like Emperor Palpatine. Until that happens, I will not be satisfied. And as far as I'm concerned, you have been caught. I've caught you red-handed. It's till midnight, though. I said at midnight. I had the congregation in the building. As I get out Genesis. You assholes. This is coercion. Try to be professional as I can after screaming at everybody. Excuse me, I'll be right back. I got 10 minutes. On a side note, now that I mentioned that, the mirror, so I'm pretty sure what they're doing in the county here is taking an x-ray. And so basically, if two people were to walk in front of a mirror at the same time, that x-ray is going to go through both of them. That is what you're doing. This ship, I'm pretty sure I pretty much figured that out. By no means do I intend to battle, but I'm just saying be careful. So now you're getting into Star Wars. I've talked about that before. Just by what we have to go off here. Now that I recall everything, because I kind of forgot, I took a vacation. It's like me out of a trillion people. It's like the moon tonight. The cycles of the moon, like it ties into me. That's the part I'm trying to figure out. I will not accept son. I'm not your son by any means. It's just bad, dude. Like, if you're my son, I just kind of throwing yourself. It was not asked for. It doesn't seem like a very good situation in any way you look at it. And if you can conjure me up from the future out of a trillion people, you know, what's in it for you? Where are you at? What are you doing? This doorway. I've never seen it. I know I've seen the ship. I've never seen the art. I could probably assume it's similar to the ship. It's like a paradox? It doesn't make sense. So like, it would have to be a reflection. They would have to be playing some kind of game or something. I'll be right back. So, if you look, my name would be right above the moon. So the letter C would be actually physically connected to the moon, and you can see the line as it goes down like a balloon. So you look at the moon, and then you follow the stars up to the C, and that's where my name starts, and then you'll find it. Just to be specific, very clear. In English, and I think they just said in Genesis, like, you're refusing to acknowledge it. What is this? It just twinkled at. I just looked at it, and one of the stars twinkled at me, and it was clearly a woman. I promise you it was good. She did. She went. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. I will not be satisfied. The door's right here. The door's right there. I would take it that they're not actually stars, and that would be the trick here. We don't know everything, do we? That's the big joke. That's the rug. The rug out from under everybody. But really though, if you take a telescope, you can see Jupiter, so it's kind of maybe. That's probably not true. I'm waiting 5 minutes, 2 minutes. In unison with the moon, so my medicine has full effect. Oh, the ship. This ship, it all comes into the ship. I've seen it twice. I've seen it disappear once. During the day, I've seen it twice, as far as the shiny mirror, like I've said. All the questions. excuse me, guys. So I guess I'll be finished there. I decided to be preacher man for a second. Actually, I wrote that, but we'll see what Mr. Grant has to say now that he was included in the Bible.
The pulpit. He did not use the word defile, but he expressed the idea very clearly. He asked that the church be restored to the former congregation. I told him that no order had been issued prohibiting the congregation attending the church. He said, of course, the congregation could not hear a northern clergyman who differed so radically with them on questions of government. I told him the troops would continue to occupy that church for the present, and that they would not be called upon to hear disloyal sentiments proclaimed from the pulpit. This closed the argument on the first point. Then came the second. The complainant said he wanted the papers restored to him which had been surrendered to the provost marshal under protest. He was a lawyer, and before the establishment of the Confederate States government, had been the attorney for a number of large business houses at the north, that his government had confiscated all debts due alien enemies and appointed commissioners or officers to collect such debts and pay them over to the government. But in his case, owing to his high standing, he had been permitted to hold these claims for collection. The responsible officials, knowing that he would account to the government for every dollar received, he said that his government, when it came in possession of all its territory, would hold him personally responsible for the claims he had surrendered to the provost marshal. His impudence was so sublime that I was rather amused than indignant. I told him, however, that if he would remain in Memphis, I did not believe the Confederate government would ever molest him. He left, no doubt, as much amazed at my assurance as I was at the brazenness of his request. On the 11th of July, General Halleck received telegraphic orders appointing him to the command of all the armies, with headquarters in Washington. His instructions pressed him to proceed to his new field of duty with as little delay as was consistent with the safety and interest of his previous command. I was next in rank, and he telegraphed me the same day to report at department headquarters at Corinth. I was not informed by the dispatch that my chief had been ordered to a different field and did not know whether to move my headquarters or not. I telegraphed asking if I was to take my staff with me, and received word in reply, "This place will be your headquarters. You can judge for yourself." I left Memphis for my new field without delay and reached Corinth on the 15th of the month. General Halleck remained until the 17th of July, but he was very uncommunicative and gave me no information as to what I had been called to Corinth for. When General Halleck left to assume the duties of General-in-Chief, I remained in command of the District of West Tennessee. Practically, I became a department commander because no one was assigned to that position over me, and I made my reports direct to the General-in-Chief. But I was not assigned to the position of department commander until the 25th of October. General Halleck, while commanding the Department of the Mississippi, had had control as far east as a line drawn from Chattanooga north. My district only embraced West Tennessee and Kentucky west of the Cumberland River. Buell, with the Army of the Ohio, had, as previously stated, been ordered east towards Chattanooga with instructions to repair the Memphis and Charleston Railroad as he advanced. Troops had been sent north by Halleck along the line of the Mobile and Ohio Railroad to put it in repair as far as Columbus. Other troops were stationed on the railroad from Jackson, Tennessee to Grand Junction, and still others on the road west to Memphis. The remainder of the magnificent army of 120,000 men, which entered Corinth on the 30th of May, had now become that I was put entirely on the defensive in a territory whose population was hostile to the Union. One of the first things I had to do was to construct fortifications at Corinth better suited to the garrison that could be spared to man them. The structures that had been built during the months of May and June were left as monuments to the skill of the engineer, and others were constructed in a few days, plainer in design but suited to the command available to defend them. I disposed the troops belonging to the district in conformity with the situation as rapidly as possible. The forces at Donelson, Clarksville, and Nashville, with those at Corinth and along the railroad eastward, I regarded as sufficient for protection against any attack from the west. The Mobile and Ohio Railroad was guarded from Rienzi south of Corinth to Columbus, and the Mississippi Central Railroad from Jackson, Tennessee to Bolivar. Grand Junction and LaGrange on the Memphis Railroad were abandoned. South of the Army of the Tennessee and confronting it was Van Dorn, with a sufficient force to organize a movable army of 35 to 40,000 men after being reinforced by Price from Missouri. This movable force could be thrown against either Corinth, Bolivar, or Memphis, and the best that could be done in such event would be to weaken the points not threatened in order to reinforce the one that was. Nothing could be gained on the national side by attacking elsewhere because the territory already occupied was as much as the force present could guard. The most anxious period of the war, to me, was during the time the Army of the Tennessee was guarding the territory acquired by the fall in Memphis and before I was sufficiently reinforced to take the offensive. The enemy also had cavalry operating in our rear, making it necessary to guard every point of the railroad back to Columbus, on the security of which we were dependent for all our supplies. Headquarters were connected by telegraph with all points except Memphis and the Mississippi below Columbus. With these points, communication was had by the railroad to Columbus, then down the river by boat. To reinforce Memphis would take 3 or 4 days, and to get an order there for troops to move elsewhere would have taken at least 2 days. Memphis, therefore, was practically isolated from the balance of the command, but it was in Sherman's hands. Then, too, the troops were well entrenched, and the gunboats made a valuable auxiliary. During the 2 months after the departure of General Halleck, there was much fighting between small bodies of the contending armies, but these encounters were dwarfed by the magnitude of the main battle so as to be now almost forgotten except by those engaged in them. Some of them, however, estimated by the losses on both sides in killed and wounded, were equal in hard fighting to most of the battles of the Mexican War, which attracted so much of the attention of the public when they occurred. About the 23rd of July, Colonel Ross, commanding at Bolivar, was threatened by a large force of the enemy so that he had to be reinforced from Jackson and Corinth. On the 27th, there was skirmishing on the Hatchie River, 8 miles from Bolivar. On the 30th, I learned from Colonel P.H. Sheridan, who had been far to the south, that Bragg, in person, was at Rome, Georgia, with his troops moving by rail, by way of Mobile, to Chattanooga, and his wagon train marching overland to join him at Rome. Price was at this time at Holly Springs, Mississippi, with a large force and occupied Grand Junction as an outpost. I proposed to the General-in-Chief to be permitted to drive him away, but was informed that, while I had to judge for myself, the best use to make of my troops was not to scatter them, but hold them ready to reinforce Buell. The movement of Bragg himself, with his wagon trains to Chattanooga across country, while his troops were transported over a long roundabout road to the same destination without need of guards, except when in my immediate front, demonstrates the advantage which troops enjoy while acting in a country where the people are friendly. Buell was marching through a hostile region and had to have his communications thoroughly guarded back to a base of supplies. More men were required to further the national troops penetrated into the enemy's country. I, with an army sufficiently powerful to have destroyed Bragg, was purely on the defensive and accomplishing no more than to hold a force far inferior to my own. On the 2nd of August, I was ordered from Washington to live upon the country, on the resources of citizens hostile to the government, so far as practicable. I was also directed to handle rebels within our lines without gloves, to imprison them, or to expel them from their homes and from our lines. I do not recollect having arrested and confined a citizen, not a soldier, during the entire rebellion. I am aware that a great many were sent to northern prisons, particularly to Joliet, Illinois, by some of my subordinates with the statement that it was my order. I had all such released the moment I learned of their arrest, and finally sent a staff officer north to release every prisoner who was said to be confined by my order. There were many citizens at home who deserved punishment because they were soldiers when an opportunity was afforded to inflict an injury to the national cause. This class was not the kind that were apt to get arrested, and I deemed it better that a few guilty men should escape than that a great many innocent ones should suffer. On the 14th of August, I was ordered to send 2 more divisions to Buell. They were sent the same day by way of Decatur. On the 22nd, Colonel Rodney Mason surrendered Clarksville with 6 companies of his regiment. Colonel Mason was one of the officers who had led their regiments off the field at almost the first fire of the rebels at Shiloh. He was by nature and education a gentleman, and was terribly mortified at his action when the battle was over. He came to me with tears in his eyes and begged to be allowed to have another trial. I felt great sympathy for him and sent him with his regiment to garrison Clarksville and Donelson. He selected Clarksville for his headquarters, no doubt because he regarded it as the post of danger, it being nearer the enemy. But when he was summoned to surrender by a band of guerrillas, his constitutional weakness overcame him. He inquired the number of men the enemy had, and receiving a response indicating a force greater than his own, he said if he could be satisfied of that fact, he would surrender. Arrangements were made for him to count the guerrillas, and having satisfied himself that the enemy had the greater force, he surrendered and informed his subordinate at Donelson of the fact, advising him to do the same. The guerrillas paroled their prisoners and moved upon Donelson, but the officer in command at that point marched out to meet them and drove them away. Among other embarrassments at the time of which I now write was the fact that the government wanted to get out all the cotton possible from the South and directed me to give every facility toward that end. Hay and gold was authorized, and stations on the Mississippi River and on the railroad in our possession had to be designated where cotton would be received. This opened to the enemy not only the means of converting cotton into money, which had a value all over the world, and which they so much needed, but it afforded them means of obtaining accurate and intelligent information in regard to our position and strength. It was also demoralizing to the troops. Citizens obtaining permits from the Treasury Department had to be protected within our lines and given facilities to get out cotton, by which they realized enormous profits. Men who had enlisted to fight the battles of their country did not like to be engaged in protecting a traffic which went to the support of an enemy they had to fight, and the which went to men who shared none of their dangers. On the 30th of August, Colonel M.D. Leggett, near Bolivar, with the 20th and 29th Ohio Volunteer Infantry, was attacked by a force supposed to be about 4,000 strong. The enemy was driven away with a loss of more than 100 men. On the 1st of September, the Ridge Guard at Medon was attacked by guerrillas. The position until reinforced, when the enemy were routed, leaving about 50 of their number on the field dead or wounded, our loss being only 2 killed and 15 wounded. On the same day, Colonel Dennis, with a force of less than 500 infantry and 2 pieces of artillery, met the cavalry enemy in strong force a few miles west of Medon and drove them away with great loss. Our troops buried 179 of the enemy's dead left upon the field. Afterwards, it was found that all the houses in the vicinity of the battlefield turned into hospitals for the wounded. Our loss, as reported at the time, was 45 killed and wounded. On the 2nd of September, I was ordered to send more reinforcements to Buell. Jackson and Bolivar were yet threatened, but I sent the reinforcements. On the 4th, I received direct orders to send Granger's division also to Louisville, Kentucky. General Buell had left Corinth about the 10th of June to march upon Chattanooga. Bragg, who had superseded Beauregard in command, sent one division from Tupelo on the 27th of June for the same. This gave Buell about 17 days' start. If he had not been required to repair the railroad as he advanced, the march would have been made in 18 days at the outside, and Chattanooga must have been reached by the national forces before the rebels could have possibly got. The road between Nashville and Chattanooga could easily have been put in repair by other troops, so that communication with the North opened in a short time after the occupation of the place by the national troops. If Buell had been permitted to move in the first instance with the whole of the Army of the Ohio and that portion of the Army of the Mississippi sent to him, he could have thrown 4 divisions from his own command along the line of road to repair and guard it. Granger's division was prompted on the 4th of September. I was at the station at Corinth when the troops reached that point and found General P.H. Sheridan with them. I was surprised at seeing him and said that I had not expected him to go. He showed decided disappointment at the prospect of being detained. I felt a little nettled at his desire to did not detain him. Sheridan was a first lieutenant in the regiment in which I had served 11 years, the 4th Infantry, and stationed on the Pacific Coast when the war broke out. He was promoted to a captaincy in May 1861, and before the close of the year managed in some way, I do not know how, to get east. He went to Missouri. Halleck had known him as a very successful young officer in managing campaigns against the Indians on the Pacific Coast and appointed him acting quartermaster in southwest Missouri. There was no difficulty in getting supplies. While Sheridan served in that capacity, but he got into difficulty with his immediate superiors because of his stringent rules for preventing the use of public transportation for private purposes. He asked to be from further duty in the capacity in which he was engaged, and his request was granted. Halleck, in April 1862, Sheridan was assigned to duty on his staff. During the advance on Corinth, a vacancy occurred in the colonelcy of the 2nd Cavalry. Governor Blair of Michigan telegraphed General Halleck asking him to suggest the name of a professional soldier for the vacancy, saying he would appoint a good man without reference to his state. Sheridan was named and was so conspicuously efficient that when Corinth was reached, he was assigned to command a cavalry brigade in the Army of the Mississippi. He was in command at Booneville 1st of July with 2 small regiments when he was attacked by a force full 3 times as numerous as his own. By very skillful maneuvers and boldness of attack, he completely the enemy. For this, he was made a brigadier general and became a conspicuous figure in the army about. On this account, I was sorry to see him leaving me. Departure was probably fortunate, for he rendered distinguished services in his new field. Ranger and Sheridan reached Louisville before Buell got there, and on the night of their arrival, Sheridan, with his command, threw up works around the railroad station for the defense of troops as they came from the front. End of section 20. Recording by Jim. Little Rock, Arkansas. Jim at jocclev.com. Section 28 of Personal Memoirs of U.S. Grant. The LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jim Clevenger. Personal Memoirs of U.S. Grant by Ulysses S. Grant, Chapter 28. Advance of Van Dorn. Price enters Iuka. Battle of Iuka. At this time, September 4th, I had 2 divisions of the Mississippi stationed at Corinth, Jacinto, and Danville. There were at Corinth also brigades of MacArthur's besides cavalry and artillery. This force constituted my left wing, of which Rosecrans commanded. Ford commanded the center from Bethel to Humboldt on the Mobile and Ohio Railroad, and from Jackson to Bolivar, where the Mississippi Central crossed by the Hatchie River. General Sherman commanded on the right at Memphis, with 2 of his brigades back at Brownsville at the crossing of the Hatchie River and Ohio Railroad. This made the most convenient arrangement I could devise for concentrating all my spare forces upon any point. All the troops of the command were within telegraphic communication with each other, except those under Sherman, by bringing a portion of his command to Brownsville, from which point there was a railroad and telegraph back to Memphis. Could be had with that part of my command within a few hours by the use of couriers. In case it became necessary to reinforce Corinth by this arrangement, that Bolivar, except a small guard, could be sent by rail by the way of Jackson in less than 24 hours, while the troops from Brownsville could march up to Bolivar to take their place. On the 7th of September, I learned of the advance of Van Dorn and Price, apparently upon Corinth. 1 division was brought from Memphis to Bolivar to meet any emergency that might arise from this move of the enemy. I was much concerned because my first duty after holding the territory acquired within my command, was to prevent reinforcing of Bragg in Middle Tennessee. Already the Army of Northern Virginia had defeated the army under General Pope and was invading Maryland. In the center, General Buell was on his way to Louisville, and Bragg marching parallel to him with a large Confederate force for the Ohio River. I had been constantly called upon to reinforce Buell until at this time my force numbered less than 50,000 men of all arms. This included everything from Cairo south within my jurisdiction. If I too should be driven back, the Ohio River would become the line dividing the belligerents west of the Alleghenies, while at the east the line was already further north than when hostilities commenced at the opening of the war. It is true Nashville was never given after its first capture, but it would have been isolated, and the garrison there would have been obliged to beat a hasty retreat if the troops in West Tennessee had been compelled to fall back. To say at the end of the second year of the war, the line dividing the contestants at the east was pushed north of Maryland, a state that had not seceded, and at the west beyond Kentucky, another state which had been always loyal, would have been discouraging indeed. As it was, many loyal people despaired in the fall of 1862 of ever saving. The administration at Washington was much concerned for the safety of the cause it held so dear, but I believe there was never a day when the president did not think that, in some way or other, so just as ours would come out triumphant. Up to the 11th of September, Rosecrans still had troops on the railroad east of Corinth, but they had all been ordered in. By the 12th, all were in except the under Colonel Murphy of the 8th Wisconsin. He had been detained to guard the remainder of the stores which had not yet been brought in to Corinth. On the 13th of September, General Sterling Price entered Iuka, a town about 20 miles east of Corinth on the Memphis and Charleston Railroad. Colonel Murphy, with a few men, was guarding the place. He made no resistance, but evacuated the town on the approach of the enemy. I was apprehensive lest the object of the rebels might be to get troops into Tennessee to reinforce Bragg, as it afterwards ascertained to be. The authorities at Washington, including the General-in-Chief of the Army, were very anxious, as I have said, about affairs both in East and Middle, and my anxiety was quite as great on their account as for any danger threatening my command. I had not force enough at Corinth to attack even by stripping everything, and there was danger that before troops could be got from other points, he might be far on his way across the Tennessee. To prevent this, all spare forces at Bolivar and Jackson were ordered to Corinth, and cars were concentrated at Jackson for their transportation. 24 hours from the transmission of the orders, the troops were at their destination, although there had been a delay of 4 hours resulting from the forward train getting off the track and stopping all the others. This gave a reinforcement of near 8,000. General Ord in command. General Rosecrans commanded the district of Corinth with a movable force of 9,000, independent of the garrison deemed necessary to be left behind. It was known that General Van Dorn was about 4 days' march south of us with a large force. It might have been part of his plan to attack at Corinth, Price coming from the east while he came up from the south. My desire was to attack Price before Van Dorn could reach Corinth, or go to his relief. General Rosecrans had previously had his headquarters at Iuka, where his command was spread out along the Memphis and Charleston Railroad eastward. While there, he had a most excellent map prepared showing all the roads and streams in the surrounding country. He was also personally familiar with the ground, so that I deferred very much to him in my plans for the approach. We had cars enough to transport all of General Ord's command, which was to go by rail to Burnsville, a point on the road about 7 miles west of Iuka. From there, his troops were to march by the north side of the railroad and attack Price from the northwest, while Rosecrans was to move eastward from his position south of Corinth by way of the Jacinto Road. Small force was to hold the Jacinto Road, where it turns to the northeast, while the moved on the Fulton Road, which comes into Iuka further east. This plan was suggested by Rosecrans. Bear Creek, a few miles to the east of the Fulton Road, is a formidable obstacle to the movement of troops in the absence of bridges, all of which in September 1862 had been destroyed in that vicinity. The Tennessee, to the northeast, not many miles away, was also a formidable obstacle for an army followed by a pursuing force. Ord was on the northwest, and even if a rebel movement had been possible in that direction, it could have brought only temporary relief, for it would have carried Price's army to the rear of the national forces and isolated it from all support. It looked to me that if Price would remain in Iuka until we could get there, his annihilation was inevitable. On the morning of the 18th of September, General Ord moved by rail to Burnsville, and there left the cars and moved out to perform his part of the program. He was to get as near the enemy as possible during the day and entrench himself so as to hold his position until the next morning. Rosecrans was to be up by the morning of the 19th on the two roads before described, and the attack was all three quarters simultaneously. Troops enough were left at Jacinto and Rienzi to detain any cavalry that Van Dorn sent out to make a sudden dash into Corinth until I could be notified. There was a telegraph on the railroad, so there would be no delay in communication. I detained cars and locomotives enough at Burnsville to transport the whole of Ord's command at once, and if Van Dorn had moved against Corinth instead of Iuka, I could have thrown in reinforcements to the number of 7,000 or 8,000 before he could have arrived. I remained at Burnsville with a detachment of about 900 men from Ord's command and communicated with my two wings by courier. Ord met the advance of the enemy soon after Burnsville. Quite a sharp engagement ensued, but he drove the rebels back with considerable loss, including one general officer killed. He maintained his position and was ready to attack by daylight the next morning. I was very much disappointed at receiving a dispatch from Rosecrans after midnight from Jacinto, 22 miles from Iuka, saying that some of his command had been delayed and that his column was not yet up as far as Jacinto. He said, however, that he would still be at Iuka by 2 o'clock the next day. I did not believe this possible because of the distance and the condition of the roads, which was bad. Besides, troops, after a forced march of 20 miles, are not conditioned for fighting the moment they get through. Might do in marching to relieve the garrison, but not to make an assault. I immediately sent Ord a copy of Rosecrans' dispatch and ordered him readiness to attack the moment he heard the sound of guns to the south or southeast. He was instructed to notify his officers to be on the alert for any indications of battle. During the 19th, the wind blew in the wrong direction to transport either towards the point where Ord was or to Burnsville, where I had remained. Hours before dark on the 19th, Rosecrans arrived with the head of his column at Garnett's, the point where the Jacinto Road to Iuka leaves the road going east. He here turned north without sending any troops to the Fulton. While still moving in column up the Jacinto Road, he met a force of the enemy and had his advance badly beaten and driven back upon the main road. In this short engagement, his loss was considerable for the and one battery was taken from him. The wind was still blowing hard and in the wrong direction to transmit sounds towards either Ord or me. Neither he nor I, nor anyone in either command heard a gun that was fired upon the battlefield. After the engagement, Rosecrans sent me a dispatch announcing the result. This was brought by a courier. No road between Burnsville and the position then occupied by Rosecrans, and the country was impassable for a man on horseback. The courier, bearing the message, was compelled to move west nearly to Jacinto, leading to Burnsville. This made it a late night before I learned of the battle that had taken place during the afternoon. I at once notified Ord of the fact and ordered him to attack early in the morning. The next morning, Rosecrans himself renewed the attack into Iuka with but little resistance. Ord also went in according to orders without hearing a gun from the south of town, but supposing the troops coming from the southwest must be up by that time. Rosecrans, however, had put upon the Fulton Road, and the enemy had taken advantage of this neglect and retreated by that road during the night. Word was soon brought to me that our in Iuka. I immediately rode into town and found he was not being pursued even by the cavalry. I ordered pursuit by the whole of Rosecrans' command, with him a few miles in person. He followed only a few miles after I left him and then went into camp, and the pursuit was continued no further. I was disappointed at the result of the Battle of Iuka, but I had so high an opinion of General Rosecrans that I found no fault at the time. End of section 28. Recording by Jim Clevenger, Little Rock, Arkansas. Jim at jocclev.com. Section 29 of Personal Memoirs of U.S. Grant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jim Clevenger. Personal Memoirs of U.S. Grant by Ulysses S. Grant. 59. Van Dorn's Movements. Battle of Corinth. Command of the Department of the Tennessee. On the 9th of September, General George H. Thomas was ordered east to reinforce Buell. This threw the Army at my command still more. The Memphis and Charleston Railroad was abandoned except at Corinth, and small forces were left at Chewalla and Grand Junction. Soon afterwards, the latter of these two places was given up, and Bolivar became our most advanced position on the Mississippi Central Railroad. Our cavalry was kept well to the front, and frequent expeditions were sent out to watch the movements of the enemy. We were in a country where nearly all the people, except the Negroes, were hostile to us and friendly to the cause we were trying to suppress. It was easy, therefore, for the enemy to get early information on our move. We, on the contrary, had to go after our information in force and then often returned without it. On the 22nd, Bolivar was threatened by a large force from south of Grand Junction, supposed to be 20 regiments of infantry with cavalry and artillery. I reinforced Bolivar and went to Jackson in person to superintend the movement of troops to whatever point the attack might be made upon. The troops from Corinth were brought up to repel the threatened movement without a battle. We followed the enemy south of Davis's Mill in Mississippi. On the 30th, I found that Van Dorn was apparently endeavoring to strike the Mississippi above Memphis. At the same time, other points within my command were so threatened that it was impossible to concentrate a force to drive him away. There was at this juncture a large Union force at Helena, Arkansas, which, had it been within my command, I could have ordered across the attack and break up the Mississippi Central Railroad far to the south. This would not only have called Van Dorn back, would have compelled the retention of a large rebel force far to the south to prevent a of such raids on the enemy's line of supplies. Geographical lines between the commands during the rebellion were not always well chosen, or they were too rigidly adhered to. Van Dorn did not attempt to get upon the line above Memphis, as had apparently been his intention. He was simply covering a deeper design, one much more important to his cause. By the 1st of October, it was fully apparent that Corinth was to be attacked with great force and determination, and that Van Dorn, Lovell, Price, Villepigue, and Rust had joined their strength for this purpose. There was some skirmishing outside of Corinth with the advance of the enemy on the 3rd. The rebels massed in the northwest angle of the Memphis and Charleston and the Mobile and roads, and were thus between the troops at Corinth and all possible reinforcements. Any fresh troops for us must come by a circuitous route. On the night of the 3rd, accordingly, I ordered General McPherson, who was at Jackson, to join Rosecrans at Corinth with reinforcements picked up along the line of the railroad equal to a brigade. Hurlbut had been ordered from Bolivar to march for the same destination, and as Van Dorn was coming upon Corinth from the northwest, some of his men fell in with the advance of Hurlbut. Some skirmishing ensued on the evening of the 3rd. On the 4th, Dorn made a dashing attack out to capture Rosecrans before his reinforcements could come up. In that case, the enemy himself could at the defenses of Corinth and held at bay all the Union troops that arrived. In fact, he could have taken the offensive against the reinforcements with 3 or 4 times their number and still left a sufficient garrison in the works about Corinth to hold them. He came near success, some of his troops penetrating the national lines at least once, but the works that were built after Halleck's departure enabled Rosecrans to position until the troops of both McPherson and Hurlbut approached towards the rebel front and rear. The enemy was finally driven back with great slaughter. All their charges made with great gallantry were repulsed. The loss on our side was heavy, but nothing to compare with Van Dorn's. McPherson came up with the train of cars bearing his command as close to the enemy as was prudent, debarked on the rebel flank, and got into the support of Rosecrans just after the repulse. His approach, as well as that of Hurlbut, was known to the enemy and had a morale effect. General Rosecrans, however, failed to follow up the victory, although I had given specific orders in advance of the battle for him to pursue the moment the enemy was repelled. He did not do so. The order after the battle. In the first order, he was notified that the force of 4,000 men, which was going to his assistance, would be in great peril if it was not pursued. General Ord had joined Hurlbut on the 4th and, being senior, took command of his troops. This force encountered the head of Van Dorn's retreating column just as the hatch, a bridge some 10 miles out from Corinth. The bottom land here was swampy and bad for the operation of troops, making a good place to get an enemy into. Ord attacked the troops that had crossed the bridge and drove them back in a panic. Many were killed and others were drowned by being pushed off the bridge in their hurried retreat. Ord followed the main force. He was too weak in numbers to assault, but he held the bridge and compelled the enemy to resume his retreat by another bridge higher up the stream. Ord was wounded in this engagement. Command devolved on Hurlbut. Rosecrans did not start in pursuit till the morning of the 5th, and then took the wrong road. Moving in the enemy's country, he traveled with a wagon train to carry his provisions and munitions of war. His march was therefore slower than that of the enemy, who was moving towards his supplies. 2 or 3 hours of pursuit on the day of battle, without anything except what the men on their persons, would have been worth more than any pursuit commenced the next day could have possibly been. And he did start. If Rosecrans had followed the route taken by the enemy, he would have come upon Van Dorn in a swamp with a stream in front and the only bridge. But he took the road leading north towards Chewalla instead of west, and after having marched as far as he had moved to get to the Hatchie, he was as far from battle as when he started. Hurlbut had not the numbers to meet any versus Van Dorn's if they had been in any mood for fighting, and he might have been in great peril. I now regarded the time to accomplish anything by pursuit as past, and after Rosecrans reached Jonesboro, I ordered him to return. He kept on to Ripley, however, and was persistent in one further. I therefore ordered him to halt and submitted the matter to the General-in-Chief, who allowed me to exercise my judgment in the matter, but inquired, why not pursue? I ordered Rosecrans back. Had he gone much further, he would have met a greater force than Van Dorn, and behind entrenchments, or on chosen ground. And the probabilities are he would have lost his army. The Battle of Corinth was bloody, our loss being 315 killed, 1,812 wounded, and 232 missing. The enemy lost many more. Rosecrans reported 1,023 dead and 2,225 prisoners. He fought behind breastworks, which accounts for some degree of the disparity. Among the killed on our side was General Hackleman. General Oglesby was badly, it was for some time supposed mortally, wounded. I received a congratulatory letter from the President, which expressed also his sorrow for the losses. This battle was recognized by me as being a decided victory, though not so complete as I had hoped for, nor nearly so complete as I now think was within the easy grasp of the commanding officer at Corinth. Since the war, that the result, as it was a crushing blow to the enemy, and felt by him much more than it was appreciated at the North. Leave me further anxiety on the safety of the territory of my jurisdiction, and soon after receiving reinforcements, I suggested to the General-in-Chief movement against Vicksburg. On the 23rd of October, I learned of Pemberton's being in command at Holly Springs and much reinforced by conscripts and troops from Alabama and Texas. The same day, General Rosecrans from duty with my command, and shortly after, he succeeded Buell in the command of the Army in Middle Tennessee. I was delighted at the promotion of Rosecrans to a separate command because I still believed that when independent of an immediate, the qualities which I, at that time, credited him with possessing would show themselves. As a subordinate, I found that I could not make him do as I wished, and had determined to relieve him from duty day. At the close of the operations just described, my force, in round numbers, was 48,500. Of these, 4,800 were in Illinois, 7,000 in Memphis, 19,200 from Mound City South, and 17,500 at Corinth. General McClernand had been authorized from Washington to go north and troops to be used in opening the Mississippi. These new levies with other reinforcements now began to come in. On the 25th of October, I was placed in command of the Department of the Tennessee. Reinforcements continued to come from the north, and by the 2nd of November, I was prepared to take the initiative. This was a great relief after the 2.5 months of continued defense over a large district of country, and where nearly every citizen was an enemy ready to give information of our every move. I have described, very imperfectly, a few of the battles that took place during this time. To describe all would take more space than I can allot to the purpose. To make special mention of all the officers and troops who distinguished themselves, take a volume. End of section 29. Recording by Jim Clevenger, Little Rock, Arkansas. Jim at joclev.com. Section 30 of Personal Memoirs of U.S. Grant. The LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jim Clevenger. Memoirs of U.S. Grant by Ulysses S. Grant, Chapter 30. The Campaign against Vicksburg. Employing the freedmen. Occupation of Holly Springs. Sherman ordered to Memphis. Sherman's movement to Mississippi. Van Dorn captures Holly Springs. Collecting forage and food. Vicksburg was important to the enemy because it occupied the first high ground coming close to the river. From there, a railroad runs east with other roads leading to all points of the southern states. A railroad also starts on the side of the river, extending west as far as Shreveport, Louisiana. Vicksburg was the only channel at the time, events of which this chapter treats, connecting the parts of the Confederacy divided by the Mississippi. So long as it was held by the enemy, the free navigation of the river was prevented, hence its importance. Points on the river between Vicksburg and Port Hudson were held as dependencies, but their fall was sure to follow the capture of the former place. The campaign against Vicksburg commenced on the 2nd of November, as indicated in a decision of the General-in-Chief in the following words. I have commenced a movement on Grand Junction with 3 divisions from Corinth and 2 from Bolivar. We'll leave here, Jackson, Tennessee, tomorrow and take command in person. If found practicable, I will go to Holly Springs and maybe Grenada, completing railroad and telegraph as I go. And my command was Mobile Steel and Ohio Railroad from about 25 miles south of Corinth north to Columbus, Kentucky. The Mississippi Central from Bolivar north to its junction with the Ohio. The Memphis and Charleston, Corinth east to Bear Creek and the Mississippi River from Cairo to Memphis. My entire command was no necessary to hold these lines, and hardly if kept on the defensive. By moving against the enemy and into his unsubdued or not yet captured territory, driving their army before us, lines would nearly hold themselves, thus affording a large force for field operations. My moving force at that time was about 30,000 men, and I estimated the enemy under Pemberton at about the same number. General McPherson commanded my left wing, General C.S. Hamilton the center, while Sherman was at Memphis with the right wing. Pemberton was fortified at the Tallahatchie, but occupied Springs and Grand Junction on the Mississippi Central Railroad. On the 8th, we occupied Junction and LaGrange, throwing a considerable force 7 or 8 miles south along the line of the railroad. The road from Bolivar forward was repaired and put in running order as the troops advanced. Up to this time, it had been regarded as an accident that large bodies of troops must from a base of supplies, which they always covered and guarded in all forward movements. There was delay, therefore, in repairing the road back and in gathering and forwarding supplies to the front. My orders, and in accordance with previous instructions from Washington, all the forage within reach was collected under the supervision of the Chief Quartermaster and the provisions under the Chief Commissary, receipts being given when there was anyone to take them. The supplies in any event to be accounted for as government stores. The stock was bountiful, but still it gave me no idea of the possibility of supplying a moving in an enemy's country from the country itself. It was at this, probably, where the first idea of a freedman's bureau took its origin. Orders of the government prohibited the expulsion of the Negroes from the protection of the army when they came in voluntarily. Humanity forbade allowing them to starve. With such an army of them, of all ages and both sexes, as had congregated about Grand Junction, amounting to many thousands, it was impossible to advance. There was no special authority for feeding them unless they were employed as teamsters, cooks, and pioneers with the but only able-bodied young men were suitable for such work. This labor would support but a very limited percentage of them. The plantations were the cotton and corn were ripe. Men and women and children above 10 years of age could be employed in saving these crops. To do this work with contraband, or to have it done, organization under a competent chief was necessary. On inquiring for such a man, Chaplain Eaton, now and the very able United States Commissioner of Education, was suggested. He proved as efficient in that field as he has since done in his present one. I gave him all the assistance and guards he called for. We together fixed the prices to be paid for the Negro, whether rendered to the government or to individuals. The cotton was to be picked from abandoned plantations, the laborers to receive the stipulated price, my recollection is 12.5 pounds for picking and ginning, from the quartermaster. He shipping the cotton north to be sold of the government. Citizens remaining on their plantations were allowed the privilege of having their crops saved by freedmen on the same terms. At once, the freedmen became self-sustaining. The money was not paid to them directly, but was expended and for their benefit. They gave me no trouble afterwards. Later, the freedmen were engaged in cutting wood along the Mississippi River to supply the large number on that stream. A good price was paid for chopping wood used for the supply of government steamers chartered and which the government had fuel. Those supplying their own fuel paid a much higher price. In this way, a fund was created, not only sufficient to feed and all old and young, male and female, but to build them comfortable cabins, hospitals for the sick, and to supply them with many comforts they had never known before. At this stage campaign against Vicksburg, I was very much disturbed by newspaper rumors that General McClernand have a separate and independent command within mine to operate against Vicksburg by way of the Mississippi River. Two commanders on the same field are all one too many, and in this case, I did not think the general selected had either the experience or the qualifications to fit him for so important a position. I feared for the safety of the troops entrusted to him, especially as he was to raise new levies, raw troops, to execute so important a trust. But I received a dispatch from General Halleck saying that I had command of all the troops sent to my department and authorizing me to fight where I pleased. The next day, my cavalry was in Holly Springs, and the enemy fell back south of the Tallahatchie. Holly Springs I selected for my depot of supplies and munitions of war, all of which at that time came by rail from Columbus, Kentucky, except a few stores collected about LaGrange and Grand Junction. This was a long line, increasing in length as we moved south, to maintain in an enemy's country. On the 15th of November, while I was still at Holly Springs, I sent word to Sherman to meet me at Columbus. We were but 47 miles apart, yet the most expeditious way for us to meet was for me to take the rail to Columbus and Sherman a steamer for the same place. At that meeting, besides talking over my general plans, I gave him his orders to join me with 2 divisions and to march them down the Mississippi Central Railroad if he could. Sherman, who was always prompt, by the 29th to Cottage Hill, 10 miles north of Oxford. He brought 3 divisions with him, leaving a garrison of only 4 regiments of infantry, a couple of pieces of artillery, and a small detachment of cavalry. Further reinforcements, he knew, were on their way from the north to Memphis. About this time, General Halleck ordered troops from Helena, Arkansas, territory west of the Mississippi was not under my command then, to cut the road in Pemberton's rear. The expedition was under Generals Hovey and C.C. Washburn and was successful so far as reaching the railroad was concerned, but the damage done was very slight and was soon repaired. The Tallahatchie, which confronted me, was very high. The railroad bridge to Pemberton strongly fortified on the south side. A crossing would have been impossible in the presence of an enemy. I sent the cavalry higher up the stream and they secured a crossing. This caused the enemy to evacuate their position, which was possibly accelerated by the expedition of Hovey and Washburn. The enemy was followed as far south as Oxford by the main body of troops and some 17 miles further by McPherson's command. Here the pursuit was halted to repair the railroad from the Tallahatchie northward in order to bring up supplies. The piles on which the railroad bridge rested had been left standing. The work of constructing a roadway for the troops was but a short matter, and later rails were laid for cars. During the delay at Oxford in repairing railroads, I learned that an expedition down the Mississippi now was inevitable, and desiring to have a competent commander in charge, I ordered Sherman, on the 8th of December back to Memphis to take. The following were his orders. Headquarters 13th Army Corps, Department of the Tennessee, Oxford, Mississippi, December 8, 1862. Major General W.T. Commanding Right Wing. You will proceed with as little delay as possible to Memphis, Tennessee, taking with you one division of your present command. On your arrival at Memphis, you will assume command of troops there and that portion of General Curtis's forces at present east of the Mississippi River, and them into brigades and divisions in your own army. As soon as possible, move with them down the river to the vicinity of Vicksburg, and with the cooperation of the gun under command of Officer Porter, proceed to the reduction of that place in such a manner as circumstance your own judgment may dictate. The amount of rations, forage, transportation, etc., necessary to take entirely yourself. The quartermaster at St. Louis will be instructed to send you transportation for 30,000 men. Should you still find yourself deficient, your quartermaster will be authorized to make efficiency from such transports as may come into the port of Memphis. On arriving in Memphis, put yourself in communication with Admiral Porter and arrange with him for his cooperation. Inform me at the earliest practicable day of the time when you will embark, and such as may then be matured. I will hold the forces here in readiness to cooperate with you in such manner the movements of the enemy may make necessary. Leave the district of Memphis in the command of an officer, and with a garrison of 4 regiments of infantry, the siege guns, and whatever cavalry may be there. U.S. Grant, Major General. This idea had presented itself to my mind earlier, for on the 3rd of December I asked Halleck if it would not be well to hold the enemy south of the Yallabusha and move a force from Helena and Memphis on Vicksburg. On the 5th, again, I suggested from Oxford to Halleck that if the Helena troops were at my command, I thought it would be possible to take them and the Memphis forces south of the mouth of the Yazoo River and thus secure Vicksburg and the state of Halleck on the same day, the 5th of December, directed me not to attempt to south of the Tallahatchie, but to collect 25,000 troops at Memphis by the 20th for the Vicksburg expedition. With 2 divisions at once, informed the general of the fact and asked whether I should expedition down the river myself or send Sherman. I was authorized to do as I thought best for the accomplishment of the great object in view.
Grab back.
Sherman, and so informed General Halleck. As stated, my sending Sherman back was expedited by a desire to get him in command of the forces separated from my direct supervision. I feared that delay might bring McClernand, who was his senior and who had authority as President and Secretary of War to exercise that particular command, and independently. I doubted McClernand's fitness, and I had good reason to believe that in forestalling I was by no means giving offense to those whose authority to command was above both him and me. Neither my orders to General Sherman, nor the correspondence between us or between General Halleck and myself contemplated at the time my going further south than the Yallabusha. Pemberton's force in my front was the main part of the garrison of Vicksburg, as the force with me was the defense of the territory held by us in West Tennessee and Kentucky. I hoped to hold Pemberton in my front, while Sherman should get in his rear and into Vicksburg. The further north the enemy could be held, the better. It was understood, however, between General Sherman and myself that our movements were to be cooperative. If Pemberton could not be held away from Vicksburg, I was to follow him. But at that time, it was not expected to abandon the north of the Yallabusha, with that point as a secondary base of supplies. The possibility of moving down the Yazoo until communications could be opened with the Mississippi was contemplated. It was my intention, and so understood by Sherman and his command, that if the enemy should fall back, I would follow him even to the gates of Vicksburg. I intended in such an event to hold the road to Grenada on the Yallabusha and cut loose from there, expecting to establish a new base of supplies on the Yazoo or at Vicksburg itself, with Grenada to fall back upon in case of failure. It should be remembered that at the time I speak of, it had not been demonstrated that an army could operate in an enemy's territory depending upon the country for supplies. A halt was called at Oxford with the advance 17 miles south of there, road to the latter point, and to bring supplies of food, forage, and munitions to the front. On the 18th of December, I received orders from Washington to divide my command into 4 Army corps, with General McClernand to command one of them, and to be assigned to that part of the Army which was to operate down the Mississippi. This interfered with plans, but probably resulted in my ultimately taking the command in person. McClernand was at that time in Illinois. The order was obeyed without any delay. Dispatches were sent to him the same day in conformity. On the 20th, General Van appeared at Holly Springs, my secondary base of supplies, captured the garrison of 1,500 men commanded by Colonel Murphy of the 8th Wisconsin Regiment, and destroyed all our munitions of war, food, and forage. The capture was a disgraceful one to the officer commanding, but not to the troops under him. At the same time, Forrest got on our line of railroad between Jackson, Tennessee, and Columbus, Kentucky, doing much damage to it. This cut me off from all communication with the North for more than a week, and it was more than 2 weeks before rations or forage could be issued from stores obtained in the regular way. This demonstrated the impossibility of maintaining so long a line of road over which to draw supplies for an army moving in an enemy's country. I determined, therefore, to my campaign into the interior with Columbus as a base and return to LaGrange and Grand Junction, destroying the road to my front and repairing the road to Memphis, making the Mississippi River the line over which to draw supplies. Pemberton was falling back at the same time. The moment I received the news of Van Dorn's success, I sent the cavalry at the front to drive him from the country. He had start enough to move north, destroying the railroad in many places, and to attack several small garrisons entrenched as guards to the railroad. All these warned of his coming and prepared to receive him. Van Dorn did not succeed in capturing a single garrison except the one at Holly Springs, which was larger than all the others attacked by him. Murphy was also warned of Van Dorn's approach, but made no preparations to meet him, not even notify his command. Colonel Murphy was the officer who, 2 months before, had evacuated Iuka on the approach of the enemy. General Rosecrans denounced him for the act and desired to have him tried and punished. I sustained the colonel at the time because his command was a small one compared with that of the enemy, not 1/10 as large, and I thought he had done well to get away without falling into their hands. His leaving large stores to fall into Price's possession I looked upon as an oversight and excused it on the ground of inexperience in military matters. He should, however, have destroyed them. This last surrender demonstrated to my mind that Rosecrans' judgment of Murphy's conduct at Iuka was correct. The surrender of Holly Springs was most reprehensible and showed either the destruction of Colonel Murphy to the cause which he professed to serve, or gross cowardice. After the war was over, I read from the diary of a lady who accompanied General Pemberton in his retreat from the Tallahatchie that the retreat was almost a panic. The roads were bad and it was difficult to move the artillery and trains. Why there should have been a I do not see. No expedition had yet started down the Mississippi River. Had I known the demoralized condition of the enemy, or the fact that Mississippi abounded so in all army supplies, I would have been in pursuit of Pemberton while his cavalry was destroying the roads in my rear. After sending cavalry to drive Van Dorn away, my next order was to dispatch all the wagons we had, under proper escort, to collect and bring in all supplies of forage and food from a region of 15 miles east and west of the road from our front, leaving 2 months' supplies for the families of those whose stores were taken. I was amazed at the quantity of supplies the country afforded. It showed could have subsisted off the country for 2 months instead of 2 weeks without going beyond the limits designated. This taught me a lesson, which was taken advantage of later in the campaign when our army lived 20 days with the issue of only 5 days' rations by the commissary. Our loss of supplies was great at Holly Springs, but it was more than compensated for those taken from the country and by the lesson taught. The news of the capture of Springs and the destruction of our supplies caused much rejoicing among the people remaining in Oxford. They came with smiles on their faces indicating intent to ask what I was going to do now without anything for my soldiers to eat. I told them that I was not disturbed, that I had already sent troops and wagons to collect all the food and forage they could find for 15 miles on each side of the road. This soon changed, and so did the inquiry. The next was, what are we to do? My response was that we had endeavored to feed ourselves, our own northern resources, while visiting them. Our friends in gray had been enough to destroy what we had brought along, and it could not be expected that men with arms in their hands would starve in the midst of plenty. I advised them to immigrate east or west 15 miles and assist up what we left. End of section 30. Recording by Jim, Little Rock, Arkansas. Jim at jocclev.com. Section 31 of Personal Memoirs of U.S. Grant. This is a recording. All LibriVox recordings. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jim Clevenger, Personal Memoirs of U.S. Grant by Ulysses S. Grant, Chapter 31. Headquarters moved to Holly Springs. General McClernand in command. Assuming command at Young's Point. Operations above Vicksburg. Fortifications about Vicksburg. The Canal. Lake Providence. Operation Yazoo Pass. This interruption in my communications north, I was really cut off from communication with a great part of my own command during this time. Sherman's movement before McClernand could arrive, for my dispatch of the 18th did not reach McClernand. Pemberton got back to Vicksburg before Sherman got there. The rebel positions were on a bluff on the Yazoo River, some miles above its mouth. The waters were high, so that the generally overflowed, leaving only narrow causeways of dry land between points of debarkation and the high bluffs. These were fortified and defended at all. The rebel position was impregnable against any force that could be brought against its front. Sherman could not use 1/4 of his force. His efforts to capture the city or the high ground north of it were necessarily unavailing. Sherman's attack was very unfortunate, but I had no opportunity of communicating with him after the destruction of the road and telegraph to my rear on the 20th. He did not know but what I was in the rear of the enemy, and depending on him, new base of supplies for the troops with me. I had, before he started from Memphis, directed him to take with him a few small steamers suitable for the navigation of the Yazoo, not knowing but that I might want them to supply me after cutting loose from my base at Grenada. On the 23rd, I removed my headquarters back to Holly Springs. The troops were drawn back gradually, but without haste or confusion, finding supplies abundant and no enemy following. The road was not damaged south of Holly Springs by Van Dorn, at least not to an extent to cause any delay. As I had resolved to move headquarters to Memphis, prepare the road to that point, I remained at Holly Springs until this work was completed. On the January, the work on the road from Holly Springs to Grand Junction and then to Memphis being completed, my headquarters to the latter place. During the campaign here described, the mostly captures were about equal, crediting the rebels with their Holly Springs capture, but not hold. Sherman's expedition down the river, he had 20,000 men taken from Memphis and was reinforced by 1,000 more at Helena, Arkansas. The troops on the west bank of the river had previously been assigned to my command. McClernand, having received the orders for his assignment, reached the mouth of the Yazoo on the 2nd of January and immediately assumed the command of all the troops with Sherman, being a part of his own corps, the 13th, and all of Sherman's, the 15th. Sherman and Admiral Porter, with the fleet, had withdrawn from the Yazoo. After consultation, they decided that neither the Army nor Navy could render service to the cause where they were, and learning that I On from the interior of Mississippi, they determined to return to the Arkansas River to attack Arkansas Post, about 50 miles up that stream and garrisoned by about 5,000 or 6,000 men. Sherman had learned of the existence of this force through a man, the enemy, with a steamer loaded with ammunition and other supplies intended for his command. The man had made his escape. Herndon approved this move reluctantly, as Sherman says. No obstacle was encountered, and boats and transports were within range of the fort. After 3 days' bombardment by the Navy, an assault was made by the troops and Marines, resulting in the capture of the place and in taking 5,000 prisoners, 18 guns. I was at first disposed to disapprove of this move as an unnecessary side movement, having no especial bearing on the work before us. But when the result was understood, I regarded it as very important. And Confederate troops left in the rear might have caused us much trouble and loss of property while navigating the Mississippi. Shortly after the reduction of Arkansas Post and the capture of the garrison, McClernand returned with his entire force to Napoleon at the mouth of the Arkansas River. From here, I received messages from both Sherman and Admiral Porter urging me to come and take command in person and expressing their distrust of McClernand's ability and fitness for so important and intricate an expedition. On the 17th, I visited McClernand and his command at Napoleon. It was made evident to me that both the Army and Navy were so distrustful of McClernand's command that, while they would do all to ensure success, this distrust was an element of weakness. It would have been criminal to send troops under these circumstances into such danger. By this time, I had received to relieve McClernand or to assign any person else to the command of the river expedition or to assume command in person. I felt great embarrassment about McClernand. He was the senior major general after myself within the department. It would not do, with his rank and ambition, to assign a junior over him. Nothing was left, therefore, but to assume the command myself. I would have been glad to put Sherman in command, to give him an opportunity to accomplish what he had failed in the December before, but there seemed no other way out of the difficulty, for he was McClernand. Sherman's failure needs no apology. On the 20th, I ordered General McClernand with the entire command to Young's Point and Milliken's Bend, while I returned to Memphis to make all the necessary preparation territory behind me secure. General Hurlbut, with the 16th Corps, was left in command. The Charleston Railroad was, while the Mississippi Central was given up. Columbus was the only point between Cairo and Memphis River left with a garrison. All the troops and guns on the abandoned railroad and river were sent to the front. On the 29th of January, I arrived at Young's Point and assumed command the following day. General McClernand took exception in the most characteristic way for him. His correspondence with me on the subject was more in the nature of a reprimand than a protest. It was highly insubordinate, but I overlooked it, as I believed for the good of the service. General McClernand was a politician of very considerable prominence in his state. He was a member of Congress when the Secession War broke out. He belonged to that political party which furnished all the was to a vigorous prosecution of the war for saving the Union. There was no delay in his self for the Union at all hazards, and there was no unfound in his declaration of where he stood in the contest before the country. He also gave up his seat in take the field in defense of the principles he had proclaimed. The real work of the campaign and siege of Vicksburg now began. The problem was to secure a footing upon dry ground on the east side of from which the troops could operate against Vicksburg. The Mississippi River from Cairo south runs through a rich alluvial valley of many miles in width, bound on the east by land running from 80 up to 2 or more hundred feet above the river. Side, the highest land, except in a few places, is but little above the highest water. Through this valley, the river meanders in the most tortuous way, varying in direction to all points of the compass. At places to the very foot of the bluffs, after leaving Memphis, there are no such highlands water's edge on the east shore until Vicksburg is reached. The intervening land is cut up by bayous filled from the river in highways, many of them navigable for steamers. All of them would be, except for overhanging trees, narrowness, and tortuous course, making it impossible to turn the bends with vessels of any considerable length. Cross this country in the face of an enemy was impossible. Navigating it proved equally impracticable. The strategical way, according to the rule, therefore, would have been to go back to Memphis, establish that base of supplies, fortify it so that the storehouses could be held by a small garrison, and move from there along a railroad, repairing as we advanced, to the Yallabusha or to Jackson, Mississippi. At this time, the North had become very much discouraged. Many strong Union men believed that the war must prove a failure. The 1862 had gone against the party which was for the prosecution of the war Union if it took the last man and the last dollar. Voluntary enlistment ceased throughout the greater part of the North, and the draft had been resorted to fill up our ranks. It was my judgment at the time that to make a backward movement as long as that from Vicksburg to Memphis would be interpreted by many of those yet full of hope for the preservation of the Union to defeat, and that the draft would be resisted, desertions ensue, and the power to capture and punish deserters lost. There was nothing left to be done but to go forward, decisive victory. My mind from the moment I took command in person at Young's Point. The winter of 1862 was a noted one for continuous high water in the Mississippi and for heavy rains along the lower river. To get dry land, or rather land above the water, to encamp the troops upon took many miles of river front. We had to occupy the levees and the ground immediately behind. This was so limited that one corps, the 17th, under General McPherson, Providence, miles above Vicksburg. It was in January. The troops took their position opposite. The water was very high and the rains were incessant. There seemed no possibility of a land movement before the end of March or later, and it would not do to lie idle all this time. The effect would be demoralizing to the troops and injurious to their health. Friends in the North would have grown more and more discouraged, and enemies in the same section more and more their jibes and denunciation of the cause and those engaged in it. I always admired the South, as bad as I thought their cause, for the boldness with which they silenced all opposition and all croaking, by press or by individuals within their control. All times, whether a civil war between sections of a common country or between nations ought to be avoided, if possible, with honor. But once entered into, it is too much for human nature to tolerate an enemy within their ranks to give aid and comfort to the armies of the opposing section or nation. Vicksburg, as stated before, is on the first high land coming to the river's edge, below that on which Memphis stands. The bluff, or highland, follows the left bank of the Yazoo for some distance and continues in a southerly direction to the Mississippi River. Thence it runs along the Mississippi to Warrenton, 6 miles below. The Yazoo River leaves the highland a short distance below Haynes's Bluff and empties into the Mississippi 9 miles above Vicksburg. Vicksburg is built on the end where the Mississippi washes the base of the hill. Haynes's Bluff, 11 miles from Vicksburg on the Yazoo River, was strongly fortified. The whole distance from there to Vicksburg and thence to Warrenton was also entrenched, with batteries at suitable distances and rifle pits connecting them. From Young's Point, the Mississippi turns in a northeasterly direction to a point just above the city, when it again turns and runs southwesterly, leaving vessels which might attempt to run the blockade exposed to the fire of batteries 6 miles below the city before they were in upper batteries. Since then, the river has made a cutoff, leaving was the peninsula in front of the city, an island. North of the Yazoo was all a marsh, heavily timbered, cut up with bayous, and much overflowed.
Much overflowed. We're gonna stop there. I'm getting tired. It's getting late. We're listening. We're in it. It's been a good one. We got out the Bible on them. But we'll be back tomorrow.